5 rounds left in the URC, and we still have 11 teams with realistic chances of making the playoffs. My name is Mark. Let's talk rugby. Round 14 of the URC is still ultra competitive from first all the way down to 11th to get those 8 playoff places. We got some big games this weekend as well that will affect the prospects of the teams going for those places. A win obviously really boosts that prospect for any team that does so, but a loss would be a big dent at this stage of the season as well. And maybe, some teams, especially those kind of that are currently outside of the playoffs, could completely hold any chance for them of making it. But then we also do have some jostling further down the table as well. Going to go down through each of the fixtures that we have this weekend, just talk a little bit about the prospects for each of the teams as well. So we're going to start with Ulster versus Cardiff. This one is on Friday, April 19th. Kickoff is 7:35, and it is Ulster in 8th place versus Cardiff in 12th. It's the Kingspan Stadium. So two teams not in the best of form at the minute. Ulster, though, first home game for Richie Murphy in charge, so they'll be hoping for some kind of bounce from that. But if we look at recent form for both the teams, Ulster with just 3 wins from the last 7, Cardiff with only a solitary win in their last 7, and they're in a run of 5 defeats. Ulster on losing streak of 2, those 2 games that they lost on the South African tour, but that's out of the way now. So Ulster hoping to get a kickstart here for the run in for them, so that they can maybe stay in there in that 8th place or get above that as well, and make the playoffs. And then once you're in the playoffs, well then anything goes from there really. So Cardiff team early on in the season, we saw like young guys, and they're looking like a decent crop of players. And we saw some Welsh, a lot of Welsh representation from them as well during the Six Nations. But this run of 5 defeats in a row has got to be wearing on them as well. And with such a young group of guys as well, you got to look then to kind of some of the older heads that are still there in terms of leadership for the team as well. Same with Ulster as well. They've got to look to some of their senior players and have them step up and really lead those younger players, through that as well. So, Ulster with some decent youth coming through this season at the start of the season, but then as they lost their way, then, things went a little bit against them. And now, at a point, it feels like for Ulster, this is a must-win game. And I think because it is Richie Murphy's first game there up in the Kingspan, I think Ulster will get a win in this one. It may not be smooth. They might have to scrap their way to the win, but I think they're going to get there in the end. Cardiff, I think, will give them a decent game, but just that run of defeats, I think, they say winning is a habit. Unfortunately, losing is a habit as well for teams, and that might count against them. They might get a chance towards the end and maybe just not have the confidence to be able to take it through, or the accuracy or whatever. But yeah, I'm going for Ulster to win that one. Next game then, also on Friday at 7:35 kickoff, is Glasgow Warriors versus Sharks. This is at Scotstoun Stadium. It's 2nd versus 13th. So, Glasgow having a fantastic season, and they want to keep that going. They don't want to slip up in the last few rounds and not, get home berth possibility, at least through the quarterfinal and the semi-final of the playoffs. Sharks, bit of a bounce for them. After being terrible for most of the season, they've at least kind of clawed their way off the bottom of the table. And, it's for both of these teams, I think it's an important game because, first of all, obviously for Glasgow, because Glasgow now, 2nd place, 5 points behind Leinster. Leinster are on their South African tour now, which we saw last year, when they sent a weakened team down there. It didn't all go their way. Now they've sent somewhat stronger of a squad this year, but there's still the possibility of at least one defeat down in South Africa, if not two, which is an opportunity for Glasgow. So they've got to take that opportunity, and they've got to win this game with a bonus point. I feel, that if Leinster do slip up, they're there to take advantage of it. For the Sharks, then, they've moved off that bottom of the table now, and they're now 6 points behind Cardiff in 12th place. I think that is a realistic target for them by the end of the season, but they've got to get some wins. This is, I think, maybe a tough one for them to go to Scotstoun and get a win, but a couple of wins in a row, and maybe they're bouncing a little bit in terms of confidence. And if they get a couple of early scores, then that could spark a special performance from them. They do have the players to do it. It's just being able to go there, in a tough place to go, really, and perform. So we'll see what happens there. But Glasgow are on a good run of form. Glasgow won 5 of the last 7, 4 in a row at the moment. The Sharks have only won 2 of the last 7, but it has been the last 2 games as well. So both teams coming in on winning streaks. One of them is going to lose that winning streak tonight, and I think it's probably going to be the Sharks. I'm going to back Glasgow to win this one, but again, I think the Sharks are going to give them a tough game. Okay, next then on to the Saturday game. So first of all, early game, 2 p.m. kickoff, and it is Emirates Lions versus Leinster at Emirates Airlines Park. I'm sure there's a proper name that isn't the sponsor of the team for that stadium. So if you want to post what that is down below, because I can never remember the name of South African stadiums, because they all have these sponsors seems to be everywhere for, right? And it's not just in South Africa, obviously, it's ubiquitous, but I guess, I've been a fan of Northern Hemisphere rugby for long enough to know what stadiums used to be called before all the sponsorship crap came in. But anyway, it's 11 versus first. Leinster have picked kind of, a decent enough side. It's not quite up to, I'd say, the standard that you would see maybe if they didn't have the Champions Cup stuff going on, right? So we're not seeing a lot of the Ireland internationals in there, but compared to the side that we see kind of week in, week out from Leinster in the URC, it's not that far off. I'd say there are a couple of players in there who you wouldn't be picking as starters necessarily, even when the Ireland internationals are away. So we'll have to see how that goes for them. But Leinster were able to go down to South Africa last year. They got a win, and then they got absolutely destroyed in the second game against the Bulls. So this year, it's much tighter at the top of the table. They've got to get at least one win, I feel, down there. And this is probably the game, looking at their fixtures down there, it's probably the one more likely for them to win. But it doesn't mean that they are going to win. We look at the form book, but again, because the Leinster team has much changed, the form book may not be a huge guide in terms of them. But Emirates Lions have won. See, there's the stupid sponsors again. But the Lions, they won 4 of the last 7. They did lose last time out, but they're on decent. I think the form has picked up. Recently, at least in that period there, and they haven't been too far off in most of their games. The ones that lost, Leinster have won 6 of the last 7. That one defeat was against Ulster. Shortly before, actually, Ulster parted way with head coach Dan McFarland, but they've won the last 4 on the trot. And again, just looking at some of the players who are going to be playing for Leinster in this game, it feels like they should still have enough to win. But again, it's one of these ones where if it was a full strength Leinster team, you'd obviously back them to win fairly comfortably. But when Leinster go to this sort of team, there's always that chance that opposition get a decent start, or they have a purple patch in the game, and suddenly, Leinster are struggling a little bit, and they don't have the superstars there to kind of dig them out of a hole. So we'll have to see how this works out for them. I think Leinster will win the game. I'm not sure if they're going to get a bonus point. I think they might. I think they might be driven to get a bonus point because they're made to work hard for the win, is what I'm thinking. I don't think they're going to easily stroll to a bonus point win, but I think the Lions will put enough pressure on them that they'll have to produce a performance that gets them a bonus point. So I'm going to go for Leinster in that one. Then for me, the biggest game, sorry, we have one more before that. Actually, we have another game. I was going to say the biggest game of the round, but we have another game before then. It's Benetton versus Dragons, also with 2:00 kickoff. This is 6 versus 15. This is a big game for the weekend. You'd look at it and you think, well, Benetton are definitely going to beat the Dragons. But it's more the effect on the rest of the table, because, Benetton, they were up there in second place. They've slipped down outside of the playoffs, and now they've worked their way back up. This one is at Stadio Monigo, so you would expect Benetton to win. But they're going to be looking for a bonus point win. I think just a regular win is not going to be enough for them in terms of keeping the chasing pack at bay. So this is a great chance for them to potentially get a bonus point win, but also a good chance for the Dragons, because they're still in that little fight down the bottom with Zebre in terms of like who's going to potentially prop up the table at the end. And the Scarlets are only 1 point ahead of them as well, and potentially the Sharks are there too. So a win for the Dragons could catapult them up to 13th place, which again doesn't sound all that much, but for a team who've only won 3 games this season, to be able to climb up that far really would be a boost, especially when we're at this stage of the season, when teams down near the bottom are, a lot of folks are switching to next season, and, potentially, some players could be looking to kind of impress so that they maybe get more game time next year, or maybe you're going to get, hopefully get contract renewals, etc. So there's still a lot for the Dragons players to play for, even if there's no real effect in terms of they're not going to qualify for anything, etc. But there's still, I think, important games for them. If we look at the form, so Benetton have won 4 of their last 7, but only 1 of the last 4. But I think importantly, the last win was the last time out. So that's always a good one. Dragons have won 2 of the last 7, but again, they won the last game out as well. So there's going to be that little boost for them in terms of they got that win and they got themselves off the bottom of the table as well. So they got to be feeling good after that. But I think going to Benetton is going to be a little bit too much to them. I think Benetton are going to win this one. I'm not sure about getting a bonus point, because Benetton, they haven't got that many winning bonus points this season. I'd say it's one of the teams, Dragons' defense isn't that great, so it is one team that maybe they will get one against, but they definitely got to win. Any kind of slip up here and they're in real trouble, I think, in terms of that run in. And then yes, now we come to what I think is the game of the weekend, and it is so Bulls versus Munster. This is kickoff is 4:05. It's 3rd versus 4th, and it's at Loftus Versfeld. So you've got 2 teams here who've, since this became the South African teams joined, these 2 teams have been heavily involved in terms of the story of the winners of the competition. Bulls losing finalists 2 seasons ago, Munster the defending champions as well. So both teams who've either gotten closer or won the competition as well. So and both of them are there knowing that there's a potential for one of them maybe to catch up on one of those 2, the first 2, Leinster or more likely Glasgow, in second place, and again get that possibility of home ties up until the final. But looking at this one, you got Bulls at home, Munster. Again, they don't seem to have gotten that run of form the way they did last year. It seemed like their form really clicked, and especially their attack really clicked coming into that end of season last year. That run around about this time where they got themselves into the top 8, and then didn't look back really from there, going into the playoffs and onto the final to win. We need to see more, I think, from Munster. Of the two teams, I think Bulls are probably in the better form. Bulls obviously also decided that this game was so important that they weren't going to send a first team up to, where was it, Northampton or some? Yeah, I think they were playing Northampton. Up to Northampton in the quarterfinal of the Champions Cup, which obviously irked a lot of the English media. But again, I talked about it in my Champions Cup video, is that like the Bulls at the moment, I think the URC really is the important competition from them, because they don't really have that much history with the Champions Cup, and because of that, really there isn't as much jeopardy for them, I think, in doing that in a quarterfinal. I think once the Bulls have kind of established themselves in both the URC and the Champions Cup, and then they feel like they're able to compete on both fronts, then you're going to see more priority being switched to the Champions Cup over the years, I feel, because the Bulls are one of those teams that once they get to a Champions Cup semi-final or final, or they win it, it's going to be, that hunger is going to be there, I think, to come back for more and more. And I think in time they're going to be maybe similar to Munster in Munster's pursuit of European crowns, but at the moment not there. But of the two teams at the minute, we'll have a look at the form, but I feel like the Bulls are kind of the team that are on the up. But both teams are in decent run of forms. The Bulls have won 5 of the last 7. They did lose last time out against Leinster before the Champions Cup games, and they didn't really do themselves justice, I felt, in that game against Leinster either. They were kind of brushed aside a bit too easily, and that's going to irk them. And that's why I feel like they're really going to put it up to Munster. But Munster also have won 5 of the last 7. They are on a winning streak of 4 runs, so the form is good there. It doesn't feel like that they're quite there in terms of be like clicking fully as a team, if that makes sense. Like last year, it felt like they were coming with real momentum, whereas this year it feels like they're kind of dragging themselves up the table rather than steaming their way up the table, as it were. But they're still a dangerous team, and if that attack of theirs does click, then they're going to give Bulls a serious problem. But I think Bulls, as the home team, are probably going to nick this one. Okay, on to next game then. It is the Stormers versus Ospreys. This is 6:15 kickoff. It's at the DHL Stadium again. It's got probably a proper name to the stadium, but this is 5th versus 7th. So tight table here, and these two teams are very close to each other. Ospreys have been the best of the Welsh teams this year, and this is a chance for them, really. If they could win this, it would be a huge achievement for them, I think, and a huge boost to their chances as well of making those playoffs. At the moment, both teams in the playoffs. Ospreys just 2 points behind the Stormers, but their problem is they've got Ulster in the same amount of points, and then Edinburgh, Connacht and the Lions only 1 point behind. So the defeat here could see them potentially dropping outside of the playoffs. So there's a lot on the line for this. Sorry, they're 4 points behind the Stormers, not 2. So I don't think they will leapfrog the Stormers here, because I think to do that, because of points difference, they'd have to. I think they'd probably have to get a bonus point win and denied the Stormers any kind of bonus point from the game at all, which would be a really tall order for them. But, there's still that chance there of nicking an away win, but it would be, again, I think a famous win for them. Stormers, they've won 6 of the last 7. That just shows you how much they have come back. And they're the team, for me at least, kind of comparable to the way Munster were last year in terms of really, they're just Stormers are storming back up the table. Ospreys have won 4 of their last 7. They did have 2 defeats in a row, and then they won the last one out. Stormers have won the last 2, but again, only just 1 defeat in those last 7 games for them. So I think because of that, the confidence is going to be there in that Stormers team, and they're going to come through with the victory. Okay, on to the next one then. Connacht versus Zebre. So this one is a 7:35 kickoff. It's at the Dexcom Stadium, or the Sports Ground, in Galway, and it's 10th versus 16th. So Connacht outside of the playoffs at the minute, just 1 point outside though. And Zebre coming to town. A lot of teams will think, oh, it's Zebre, we're at home. This is a great chance for 5 points. But Connacht, geez, like, to be a Connacht fan, I really do pity them, because Connacht, the same thing against the Lions, right? Lions get down to 14. Connacht are at home. Surely Connacht are going to come out with a decent win. No, they get absolutely destroyed. So you can't say, anything for sure with this Connacht team. But looking at the form, Connacht, they've won 3 of the last 7. Zebre haven't won anything of the last 7. That win that they got seems like a distant memory at this stage now that they're back in their familiar place, bottom of the table, and those heady heights that they were before again seem a bit far away from them. Even though they're only a couple of points away, it's still looking not great for Zebre on the run in. Connacht, they've lost their last 2, but Zebre haven't won in ages, so I've got to back a Connacht win here, but I'm sure Connacht I can imagine actually out of this one that Connacht are going to win, but Zebre are going to get a bonus point, but not a losing bonus point. I think because of Connacht's porous defence, they're probably going to score 4 tries, but still lose the game by more than a couple of scores, I think. So that's my prediction on that one. And then the last game of the round is also 7:35 kickoff. This is Edinburgh versus Scarlets. It's at the Hive Stadium. It's 9th versus 14th. So again, Edinburgh, one of those teams just outside the playoff places by a point, looking for a decent, performance at home and a decent win. And it could very easily be that a lot of these teams who are around that area actually get the wins, and then just 1 or 2 teams really, who don't perform and don't get their wins and really lose out because of what happens here on this weekend. And that's why I feel like it's very important. But Edinburgh, they've won 4 of the last 7. They lost the last 2 on the bounce. Scarlets have won 2 of the last 7, but they did, 2 rounds ago they had a win. So out of the teams, they're the most recent team to win. But still, again, I feel like Edinburgh, they've definitely dropped off from the first half of the season, where they were up there in that top 4, and looked like they potentially, if they kept it going, they were going to be somewhere in that mix, at the top of the table. But form dropped off, and even though they've won 4 of the last 7, again 2 defeats on the bounce to them now. So this feels like a really important game for them to win, and I'd say, even though it is really close, I think if Edinburgh lose this game, I think come the end of the season, the end of the regular season at least, they'll look back at this as a missed opportunity, and they'll probably find themselves, a couple of points outside of the playoffs, and that win would have been enough to get them through. But I think Edinburgh are going to win this one. Scarlets, still at the minute, they're capable of, I think, for the most part, for producing like a 10 or 15 minute, even 20 minute, performance where they get their passing game going and they can cut a side open and look really good, right? Especially on counter attack. But they don't seem to have that kind of 80-minute game, set piece, etc. And kind of the forwards making it hard yards for them to be able to go away from home regularly and put in performances that are going to win in the game. So I'm going to go for Edinburgh on that one. So that's the end of that one. Hope you enjoy your rugby this weekend, and see you on the next one.